guest here. And today we have Colonel Pam Melroy from the United States and Colonel Sergei Zalyotin from Russia. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Sergei and I will give a presentation, and then we will have time for question and answers. And we will hopefully have a few stories to tell you as well that will be exciting. One of the first questions that people ask often is, how did you become an astronaut? Contrary to what you might believe, we were not born this way. We were children, and we went to high school, Gymnasium, like you, and then to university. And a very interesting story, because today you have two people who went the exact same way. This is very unusual. People often study engineering and become an astronaut. Most astronauts now are engineers and scientists, but there's always a need for test pilots. And so both Sergei and I started out our careers as pilots. So I became a pilot because I was very interested in everything to do with the sky. I studied astronomy and planetary weather in school and university and for my master's degree. But that was not close enough. I wanted to get into the sky. And so I became an Air Force pilot and eventually became a test pilot on the Air Force's new cargo airlifter, not so new now, but it was brand new, the C-17. And that was a very interesting experience because being a test pilot means you get to do experiments with airplanes. That was very interesting. Sergei.
In school I would like to be cosmonaut, but it doesn't matter to be cosmonaut, astronaut. We together fly, and now we together fly to International Space Station. But the first idea, if you would like to be astronaut, of course you should to be very nice in school, in high school. It's main idea. And I have two flights. The first flight was to the Mir space station, and I was last commander who fly to Mir space station. It was last duration flight, about 3 months, and second flight to International Space Station. It was second flight, about 2 weeks flight, but extremely difficult because we fly on the first TMA-1. It's new spaceship. We can see my first commander with Alexander Kaleri, and my emblems. The first flight, it was 15 years before, and of course we more younger than now. But when we fly in space and speed about 8 kilometers in second, and sometimes time flying a little different on the Earth. And when we come back from space, we became more younger. Do you know this story from Einstein?
Relativity, yes, Einstein. Do you want to talk about
You can see Mir space station before docking Soyuz ship. Mir was more smaller than International Space Station. Mir space station about 120 tons, and the International Space Station about 300 tons. And of course more power, more comfortable. I was at Mir and International Space Station, and I can
compare.
Excuse me, my English, I was out of practicing a lot of time, and sometimes the situation in space more comfortable talking in Russian. Sorry. Anyone can speak Russian? One? It's okay. You may ask me something in Russian sometimes, sorry. I was with Alexander Kaleri, last commander who fly to Mir space station. And it was very difficult for us to fly from Mir because I know that I was the last. And it was very difficult, sorry. If you have any question, I answer later.
Maybe you tell about the first team.
Yeah. You may see the Russian spaceship Soyuz and the situation about 5 meters before docking. Docking in space is very difficult because you should have very nice experience, look like pilot, test pilot, and in the Earth we training about 1,000 times. And of course, from this picture you can see that our planet circle, and only space you can understand that our planet very small, very nice. Okay.
Okay, okay, good. Okay, thank you, Sergei. For test pilots, it's a wonderful thing to be the first person to fly a new vehicle, and that was Sergei's experience. He also had this interesting experience of being the last person to fly a vehicle on Mir. And so this is, from a test pilot's perspective, very exciting. So for me, as an American astronaut, I flew 3 missions on the space shuttle. And I was the pilot on the first 2 missions, and then commander on my 3rd mission. And the interesting thing about the space shuttle is for several years, many years, we flew the space shuttle to deploy satellites and to do science in space. But together, the U.S., Russia, ESA, Canada, Japan, all came together in a dream to build the International Space Station together. And the idea is that science is extremely interesting in space because we have microgravity. Sometimes we say zero gravity. There is no such thing as zero gravity. Gravity is the law. It is everywhere. But you're going around and around the Earth so fast that all the forces balance out and it feels like microgravity or such small gravity that you float and everything floats. So when you do a science experiment in space, our bodies, flames, biology, materials, fluids, everything behaves differently in microgravity. And so to have a laboratory where we could all come together, all around the world, scientists, to do experiments in space. And we do this to understand the science better. It's a very interesting idea. So this is the dream when I first became an astronaut. This is very interesting too. Sergei and I were smiling about it earlier. My first flight was just a few months after his first flight. So he went to Mir and I went to the International Space Station before anybody was even living aboard. And that was my first flight. So over the course of a few flights, the space station grew in size. This is the way it looked when I approached it on my first flight. And then this is the way it looked when I approached it on my second flight. So you can see already that it was the size of Mir very early on in 2002. And this was my crew and my mission for my 3rd flight, where I was the commander. Our job was to bring up Node 2. Node 2 is like the hub of a Tinker Toy set. It's the hub of all of the international laboratories. So the U.S. lab, the European lab, the Japanese lab, all connected together. So this is a very important piece, and it was named by students in the United States Harmony, because it's where all countries come together to do science in space. You can see it in the payload bay. We had another responsibility in space on the International Space Station. To generate power, you must have a way to have electricity. If you go into your laboratory, there are outlets everywhere, right? And it's for your computers and to run the equipment, but also to keep us alive. The lights, the air conditioning and heating and telephone systems. So in space, 400, 500 kilometers, too long for an extension cord, and it would be very bad. So as you go around the Earth. So we generate power through these solar arrays, store it in batteries. So there was a solar array that came up very early on the space station, and the crew before us had folded it up. It was the one on top. And so our responsibility was to take it and put it out to the end and unfurl it. And this was supposed to be a simple final part of our mission. I'll talk for a few minutes about getting ready. We don't have pictures of the simulator for Soyuz, but perhaps you can say a few things. You said 1,000 times in the simulator to practice for rendezvous and docking. And this is a very similar experience. This Space Shuttle simulator. Over and over and over again, practicing to launch, to land, and also to dock with the space station. As Sergei said, it's very precise flying, requires great concentration to dock to the space station. Also, to build the International Space Station, we have to use the robot arm. So the space shuttle had an arm like a human arm, and this is what you see here. This is the space shuttle arm. It's attached at the shoulder, and it moves in the shoulder and the elbow and the wrist, and it can hold things. And in this case, it's holding a long pole with a camera on the end of it that was used to inspect the space station. Now, the space station also has an arm as well, but this arm is much more complicated. It can go all the way around, swing itself around. It can grapple at both ends, so you can move it to where you need it on the space station. And that was very important because the space station was much bigger than the space shuttle. So using a combination of these two robot arms to lift things and move them into position and attach a new piece. But just because you have attached the two pieces, it's like building a piece of your house and you're not ready to move in yet. You have to have the electricity and the cooling. And so our spacewalkers go out in a suit to make those connections. And Sergei, am I right? You did a spacewalk on Mir. Can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to do a spacewalk?
I have an extravehicular experience, and it was about 6 hours, and it's more difficult because you should job as a sportsman. And in Russian we have a special test, physical test. And after the test, an engineer can ask me, ready I am to do extravehicular activity or not. And the same test before you became cosmonaut. If anyone can do that after me, I may say, you ready to be cosmonaut. Show me, please.
Oh. Oh.
After 6 hours in open space, you may have rest about 1 day and night, because it's very difficult.
The suit is pressurized, so every time you move your arms, it's like squeezing a tennis ball. And so 6 hours of doing this very difficult work. It's very challenging, but we couldn't get things done if we didn't have the capability to send people out to do that. One interesting part about working in space is that it's not like school where you go home to your family at the end of the day or work in an office. At the end of the day, we all have to share together. We live together. And so we train in the simulator, and we train in the pool for spacewalks, and we train on the computer for the robotic arm. How do you train to live together? Well, we went camping. And so I took my crew sea kayaking in Alaska. And perhaps this looks like nothing to you, but if you're in Houston and the little icebergs floating by, this is a little unusual. So together we would pack up our kayak every morning and paddle, maybe 15, 25 kilometers, navigate, and then we would unpack and cook dinner, and then we would have a conversation about how we worked together that day, how we made decisions, and our leadership and our teamwork is very critical. You learn very quickly how people behave when they are very tired. You learn how they behave when they're not sure or confused about a problem, and who gets very cranky if she's not fed 3 times a day. So you learn these things about each other, and that's very important because on a crew in space, your lives depend on each other. And so you must become more than a team. You must become like a family. It's very, very important. On my mission, my 3rd mission, we had great success for the first half of the mission. We launched, we docked to the space station, we removed Node 2 using the robotic arm and put it into place over the course of 3 spacewalks. And then we took the solar array from the top of the space station and moved it out. But unfortunately, as the commander of the space station and I were unfurling the solar array, this is what we saw in the camera, and we knew something was wrong. So we called for an abort right away and went over into the space shuttle to get out the cameras, and we were very unhappy to see this. So there's actually 2 rips. This is a big one and then a small one up there. And what had happened was there are cables to keep the solar array nice and tight, and that's very important. So it was about 2/3 of the way out, and that cable had gotten snagged in a pin that was crossed. It was folding the solar array and tore it. And this is a very big problem because the European lab, Columbus, was on the ground in Florida ready to launch on the next mission. And this solar array was needed to provide power for the Columbus lab. And the problem with this solar array is there's no way to turn the electricity off. It's always electrical. And so we tell our spacewalkers, never go near this because you don't want to electrocute yourself and fry all the electronics in the suit, short circuit the robotic arm, all of those things. So it was also much further out than we ever planned to send any of our spacewalkers. It was so far that we could not even reach it with the space station arm. So we had a very big problem, especially because it was not completely out. It was like a sail of a boat. And if you are a sailor, you know you want the sail all the way up nice and tight or down flat on the deck. You don't want it halfway up flapping and making problems. And that was exactly where we were with this solar array. And as the Soyuz and the space shuttle back away from the space station, they fire thrusters which cause problems with those solar arrays if they're not nice and tight. So if we could not fix this problem, we would have to jettison the solar array, never use it. There was not a spare on the ground. And of course, the European lab could not go to the space station. So it was a very big problem. So on the ground, many people working together to come up with a solution, and this was very much like Apollo 13. The engineers said, what do they have on board the space shuttle and the space station? You know, put the box on the floor and say, what do they have? Because you must construct the solution for yourself. So we had several problems to solve. How do we fix the solar array? How do we do that from a spacewalker standpoint? And how do we get the spacewalker out there on the robotic arm? So we had teams on the ground and in space, and the space station crew and the space shuttle crew had to come together to solve this problem. So the first problem was what to do with the solar array. So the idea was to stitch up the solar array to make it so that we could deploy it and it would be tight and have the integrity. And how we did that was these stitches that we called cufflinks because they operated like a cufflink. If you've ever seen this, it slides through the hole in your shirt and then flips to lock into place. And so these were long electrical insulated cables, and we had to make these flipping bars and then seal it with electrical tape, and so they were flexible at the end. And then they would go through these holes that were just a part of the design of the solar array and then lock into place. So that was the idea, was to get out there and put that together. So my lead spacewalker had to find a way out there. So we came up with the idea to combine that long pole that belonged to the space shuttle. Here's the camera at the end, but you could put a footstool on the end, a place to stand. And then this is the space station arm. And I should tell you that this spacewalker is, he's well over 2 meters tall. So that should give you the idea of how far away that, and how big the arm had to be. So this is him repairing. You can see Scott out there. He has put in 3 of the 5. He had 2 more to create integrity. And something you might not see is way down here is the other spacewalker who is sitting at the bottom of the solar array looking up. And his job was to make sure that at no time would the arm or the spacewalker ever touch the solar array. So Scott had to use tools. He could not touch it. He had to slide the cufflink in, and he used tools to keep himself away from it. So when Scott put the first cufflink in the first hole, we of course had no time to practice this on the ground, so it was the first time anyone had done it. And he did what I think any of us would do. You slide it through the hole, and then you tug, right, to make sure that it locked in place. Except, in microgravity, the effect of this was this solar array was very floppy. So a big oscillation started all the way down here. And then Doug, who was at the bottom, cried out to Scott. This was the view he had looking up. Look out. And of course, I was looking from the space shuttle and I had no idea what he was talking about. Scott was much further away. In this picture, he had already installed all the cufflinks, but imagine him very, very close. And Doug saw when this oscillation hit the bottom and then it started back up in a curve, and he saw it approaching Scott. So Scott leaned back as far as he could so that it wouldn't touch him. And Doug lost sight of his hands and wasn't sure. Actually, we were all not sure whether the solar array had touched him or not, but it had not. And it went all the way up to the top and then back down and all the way back up and back down. And then eventually friction made it settle down. Ooh. And then he did it 9 more times. So you can get used to anything. This is true in space, right? So this is the way the space station looked after we fixed it. I always know right where to look. It's up there, but now it's producing 99% of its power, and the Columbus module was launched, and now, of course, this is the space station as it is today. So we can talk a little bit about, maybe you talk about the space station today. No, please. No, that's not fair. You please talk about the space station today, a little bit. So we continue to go up, do science.
Maybe any question, because we learned a lot of things, but we would like to know what you ask us.
Yes. Let me go back to that. I will tell you that right now we take cargo up and down on many vehicles. These are NASA commercial companies that provides like FedEx or UPS. They deliver cargo, and of course we go up and down on the Soyuz. But eventually, NASA is developing a commercial capability with commercial companies to be like a space liner. And then, of course, eventually we hope to go on to Mars. But this is probably a good time for us to take a break and just talk about this, answer any questions. So, do we have a microphone or? Okay, wonderful.
Questions?
How do you provide oxygen to the space station?
Oxygen. We have 3 variants to make oxygen on the International Space Station or Mir Space Station. First idea, we take oxygen from the Earth with big pressure. Second idea, we have special chemical reaction. We have special equipment, and after chemical reaction, this make oxygen. And the main idea, when we made oxygen from water, H2O, and after special equipment, I mean this is special, sometimes very difficult to say it in English, and oxygen go in, hydrogen go out.
It's good, yes. So chemistry is very important.
About 25 liters oxygen we need every hour, and during the day 625 about, in average. It depends, of course, from my body. For example, I'm man, 19 kilogram. Pam about 60 kilogram. It not need oxygen a lot for her. It's average.
Fler frågor?
Hello. What is the best thing about being in space?
Two things for, well, it's complicated. Every mission is unique. For me, the things that are that make you excited and move you and make you want to go back again. First one, to look at the Earth. It's very beautiful. It's amazing. My favorite thing to do when it's quiet is to float and look out the window and listen to music and see the Earth go by. And it's very interesting, some amazing sights. I think everyone feels that way looking at the Earth. I also love the sensation of being in zero gravity. You are like a gymnast. You can do as many somersaults as you want. You can lift huge things all by yourself. So you can fly through the space station. So it's a little bit like being magic. But third thing is the feeling that you get with your crew when you have a difficult problem to solve and you solve it together. And there is nothing as exciting as that to me. That is a wonderful feeling when you work together with other people and solve a very difficult problem. So.
Yesterday, one of the school asked Mr. Leonov, where is life more comfortable, in the space or in the Earth? And Mr. Leonov asked with humor, of course in the Earth, but after the flight in space.
That's a good answer.
How do you shower in the International Space Station?
In space it's not necessary to have shower. If you have small
Yes,
duck,
Miss Alexei.
no problem. If you have big duck, it go out himself. So my English. Of course we have a special shower, but sometimes it may be wet полотенце.
Like a sponge bath.
Towel.
Towel?
Towel,
yeah.
yes, wet towel and after that dry towel. Of course, sometimes that procedure is very difficult. I mean to have shower.
Yes, on the first U.S. space station called Skylab, they had a shower, and it was terrible. It was imagine a garbage bag, big flexible garbage bag with a frame that it rested in, and you zipped it up, and water shot around, and balls flying everywhere. So you could then take a shower, but then you have to let all the water out and clean it very, very carefully. So imagine if every single time you took a shower, you had to take the shower curtain down and scrub it. And you get really tired of that really quickly. And that's exactly, the astronauts said, this is no good. So we went to the same way Sergei was talking about with the towels and soap, and you can actually do this. You can wash your hair and take a shower or take a bath, I guess, with a towel. And it works fine, but it is nice to come home and stand in a shower.
So I've got two questions. The first one being, is it silent in space when you're on the spaceships, or are there lots of machines?
How quiet is the spaceship? Is it quiet? Noise? Yeah.
Of course, it's not possible make quiet in the spaceship. It's very noisy. Sometimes it may be 65, 70 decibel. And our body can very nice experience when our hair listening more difficult, and it's save your body from the noise. And after the flight, about 1 month or 2 months, it depends how long you fly, your ear became more clever, sorry.
No, this is actually a very important question. When spaceflight started with Soyuz, with shuttle, with Mir, it was hard enough to keep people alive. So all the machines are running and they're very loud, and they were very loud on all of those vehicles. We learned from this, and on the International Space Station, as we progressed, each later and later laboratory, including Columbus, was designed to be much quieter so that it would not be so much fatigue on the body. So now that we understand more about humans living in space, it is quieter on the space station than either the shuttle or Mir.
All right, thank you.
Did you have a second question?
Yeah, yes, please. I was thinking, since we humans evolved on Earth to live in those conditions in gravity, are there any big issues when you come to space that are a huge problem to the human body?
So the effect of microgravity on your body. So this is, in the U.S. we call this space adaptation sickness, and it's complicated. It isn't just motion sickness. Some people do get a little bit of motion sickness, goes away usually after about 3 days. But also much of the fluid that pools in the lower part of your body is now spread, and so you feel pressure. Your sinuses especially get very congested, and headaches, very common the first few days. But eventually your body comes to a new equilibrium. You will urinate, you will sweat, and you're dehydrated. Much less fluid in your body. So that's the biggest adaptation. But after, 3 or 4 days, very few people have problems. But most people have these headaches, and a lot of people feel some of that motion sickness, more than half on the first few days.
Thank you.
What is,
It's okay.
and now, will you go back in space or are you done? What's your job description now?
Yes, I would like fly again, but sometimes it depends on a lot of situation. And for example, 1 year before I start training for the next mission, but my doctor say maybe a little later. Okay. Every astronaut, cosmonaut would like space again. Of course, when we stay on the Earth, we dream, we sleeping, and thinking about flight again. It's very nice. It's my job.
It's true. It's true. Yes. So I flew 3 times, and obviously my 3rd flight was pretty exciting, and I wasn't sure that I could ever top that. It's also a lot of effort. You know, your children, your wife, your husband, your family. It's very hard on them. So in 2009, as the space shuttle was approaching retirement, I decided to leave NASA. So now I'm doing other things. So I don't plan to fly again as a NASA astronaut, but I'm still hopeful that someday anyone can buy a ticket just like you can on an airplane, and I would love to go back.
Do you think that colonization of other planets are possible and is the future of space travel, and if so, why?
Say it again.
Do you think that colonization of planets is the future of space travel, and if so, why is that?
Colonization? Do you want to talk about it? No, you don't want to talk about it. Okay. Yes, this is a big discussion, certainly in the United States. I see true development of space as a portfolio, a whole complex and very vibrant system. If you look at aviation today, you can go rent an airplane and get a pilot's license and go fly. Or perhaps you can become a professional crew member on a commercial aircraft and carry passengers and cargo anywhere in the world. Or you could perhaps be a military pilot who flies military missions. Or you can become a test pilot and be an explorer and a scientist with aircraft. I think that the future is a whole range of things in space, from people who visit just for tourist, commerce, education, science, and that maybe you'll be able to buy a ticket and go into low Earth orbit and visit someday like we do. And then there will be astronauts and cosmonauts who do science and fly to and from government space stations together to do science for the benefit of everyone. And then I believe that there will be explorers who will go to other planets. I think that's very important, that we have that whole range of things. This is when space is not just for a few of us, but for everyone.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you've researched anything about black materia and how it affects space.
Are you talking about dark matter?
Yeah.
Ah, yes. We had an interesting presentation actually from a professor at KTH about dark matter yesterday. So, very interesting. I think it's one of those things that does not affect us in the local space. It's more cosmology and why galaxies behave the way that they do. So it doesn't have a direct impact on us today on the International Space Station, except for maybe at a very low level that you could hardly measure. But this is a very interesting subject, and it is tied because we care about exploring other planets to learn how our own planet formed. And we care about how our solar system formed because we care about how the universe formed. So I think this is a very important area of research, and maybe perhaps you will study it someday. Tell us more.
So this is a question mostly angled towards Sergei. Do you drink vodka and say blyat in space?
Of course, I answer, but you don't speak anyone with this question, okay? You ask Russian guy, can you drink in space? When we are going flying first time, my command was 3 guys, but one of them didn't fly, and we have to make, opportunity to make a lot of equipment, and it was of course French cognac. It's no joke about 3 bottles with plastic, of course, and every week we drink about 20 grams cognac. It's very useful for the body, but it's not the law, but it's very useful. Sorry, excuse my vocabulary. And sometimes it's very difficult drink in space from the bottle, because half of the water, cognac, stay in the bottles, and you should make gravitation in space. How? You should roll around your body, and in this case, water or cognac go down on the bottle, and you drink with
straw. Yeah, so it's a physics experiment about centrifugal force.
Science.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, how difficult is it to be an astronaut? If you, for example, say that one of us here want to be an astronaut, what do you have to do more than study a lot?
So
it's not difficult to be astronaut. You should to be strong, you should to be clever, and you should to be lucky.
Yeah, so it's very technical, so it's important to study science or mathematics or engineering because so much of the equipment that is used to keep you alive, you must understand how it works, you must understand how your vehicle flies. We're both test pilots, but that is not required. It's very interesting when you're exploring, you don't always know what kinds of problems you will have. So if you have people from many different disciplines, one person may have the idea that's the exact idea that you need. And I think this is actually very important for a team that is exploring or learning new things, to have the different perspectives. So I also tell people that if you think about the people, perhaps maybe can think of some people in your class who you would be okay spending 6 months with, right? Camping or staying together. And others that you would not want to spend 6 months with. They're difficult to work with or whatever. So I tell people you can actually practice being a better person to work as a team together So sports, music, organizations, but this teamwork, this ability to work with another person is actually very important and is a part of the selection process. So I think very much so. Of course, you all know our very dear friend Christer Fuglesang, and there is no reason to think that one of you might not be the second Swedish astronaut. That would be exciting.
We asked about it, the kind of Sweden, yesterday.
Yes.
We fly into space about 55 years, and during that period, about 550 guys was in space. It's mean every year, every once, one guy flying in space from the Earth. But on the Earth, 7 billion people live. You are ready to be one of them?
I have a question about the solar panel. How long do you expect it?
I'm looking. Where
it's here.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Thank you. This one. Yes.
Is it still functioning, the repair? And
yes.
How long do you expect it to?
I know. Isn't that crazy? At the time, it was like, we have to do this, or we'll have to jettison the solar array. So it was the best idea anyone could come up with. And amazingly, then there was discussion, we'll come up with a more clever solution. In 2 years, we'll send, a year, we'll send somebody out on a spacewalk to fix it. Absolutely not. Performing 99% of design, and the decision was made very quickly, this is good, it's fixed. Go on to the next problem. So it's very interesting. Yeah.
But how long do you think it'll keep working?
Good question. So the space station was originally designed to last until 2020. So what does that mean? If you are an engineer, you have to calculate the loads and the mean time between failure of various systems. So to make it infinite is not a practical solution for an engineer. So you pick a time, you say this is the design life, and then you calculate and you make a list of all the things that if you wanted to extend beyond that you might need to do additional analysis on. And that is where we're at right now on the space station. It is absolutely designed to 2020. NASA has asked Russia, and Russia has agreed to extend the life to 2024. But it's quite possible that another 4 years beyond that. I think 2028 is quite possible, and maybe a little bit beyond that. But you saw Mir 15. So the International Space Station, we learned much from Mir. We learned much from Skylab, and I think it will last longer. But 2028 would be a long time. That would be 30 years, as the first element went up in 1998. So a 30-year lifetime would be a very long lifetime for the space station. I think perhaps what might be better is if we learn from this space station and build another one in 10 years. Sound about good? Yeah, let's do it.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
So one last question. Any student? Okay.
What's your favorite book and music to keep you sane while in space, and why?
Book or music in space?
I like music. I like Michael Jackson. I like Alla Pugacheva, and of course I have my personal books, but it Russian author. I'm not sure that you know him.
What kind of book? What kind of story?
About science fiction story.
Really? Okay, what's the story?
It was Russian Professor Belyaev who asked that in future will be breathe in other Earth. It's very difficult story.
No.
But I like fantasy story.
And me too. Maybe not surprised, but I love science fiction and fantasy also. And on each of my 3 flights, I took, only 2 weeks, but I took a book because I like to read a little bit before I go to sleep at night, every night, and so it also helped. So I took favorite books. The author Anne McCaffrey, stories about some science fiction, some fantasy, dragons, crystals, other planets, and for me the music I liked best in space was actually classical music, and it's maybe perhaps silly, but to look at the Earth with famous music about space, like from 2001: A Space Odyssey, the Blue Danube, the Viennese composer, and also Sprach Zarathustra. Those really inspiring. Oh, Wagner! I love to listen to Wagner and looking down at the Earth. It's so dramatic, right? So it all seems to fit. So that's what I.
Okay, I'm sorry I have to interrupt here and end this. I think we could go on for several hours with these questions, but unfortunately we haven't that time. So it's going to have been a great honor to have you here, both. And I thank you very much on behalf of the school. Thank you very much.
Thank you.